Well, 80 years ago, as I talk, the situation in Western Europe was falling apart at an incredible rate of knots. I'm always fascinated by 1940, not just the Battle of Britain, but once the invasion of Belgium, Luxembourg, Holland, and France side, it seemed within a matter of days from May 10th, the situation just fell apart. None of the armies were able to gather themselves properly, it seemed, and next thing you know, it's a headlong rush by the Germans to the Channel. Once the Battle of Sedan was won between 12th and 15th of May 1940, the Germans were over the River Meuse and had an open path to the Channel. And yet, as James Holland points out in the first of his War in the West books, there was ample enough opportunities that the Allies could have stopped Germany dead. Germany's military looked in person, I suppose, unstoppable, invincible, and yet the German army right through to 1945 was still mostly horse-drawn, and it was not the all-powerful colossus that it gave the impression of. There was a couple of times that, the Battle of Arras and various other smaller battles, that had the Allied response been more coordinated, they could have possibly stopped the invasion or held it off long enough so that Dunkirk wasn't what it was in the end. And yet, next thing you know, in a couple of days' time, Operation Dynamo starts to come to fruition. A couple of days on from that, troops are signed to be lifted from the beaches, and in just over a week or so, it's all over. 330,000 men lifted from the beaches. It's incredible to think that it even happened. In World War I, the front line after a while barely moved a few feet, it seemed, a few meters, and any miles that were taken were swiftly taken back. No serious movement in the First World War really happened until 1918 in the Spring Offensive, which even then ground into a halt. And yet, from May 10th, 1940, the Germans were at the Channel within a week or so. It's incredible, the difference in two wars. And yeah, at the same time, Norway was still happening, but by this point, 18th of May 1940, it had unraveled. It was beyond the Allies by that point. Churchill was up to his neck in it before he'd even taken the job. His concern was, of course, to stop the Germans, but he had to convince his own party that he was the man for the job. I'm hesitant to say he's like Boris Johnson, but both of them are not really cared for by their party. And the difference is, of course, is that Churchill saved the country. This country wasn't really alone. It had the Dominion of Canada. It had the Commonwealth, as we call it now, and all of those countries, for the most part, men came from to help out the mother country for whatever reason, be it because in those days of empire, that's what they believed in, or maybe they wanted to try and do something. Because if Britain went under, that would have been it in the summer of 1940. Whatever concerning the invasion of Britain, Operation Sea Lion, whether Hitler was really serious about it, whether the Germans were ever considering it, whether they were, despite the plans that were drawn up, were ever going to go through with it one way or the other, had Britain rolled under, say in September 1940, let's say the RAF fighter commander being mostly annihilated or pushed back, say somehow the Germans had command of the sea or the English Channel and landed and conquered this country, that would have been it. There would have been no springboard for a second front to liberate Europe. Was America going to come over in, say, 1941-42 to liberate Britain and then go on to Europe when the Japanese presumably would have kicked off one way or the other. They were building up to it. No, I don't think Roosevelt would have been able to, whatever his feelings about Britain, to muster enough support to bring a fleet over the Atlantic. And that's something else, is, how would they have gone about it? Would they have come over to Northern Ireland? Republic? Where would it have sprung from? How would it have happened? So, Britain, there's always this ribbon, like, we say the Americans were late coming into the war, and the Americans say they won it for us. Well, sure, Russian and American manpower, largely Russian manpower, American money and strength won the war. But had Britain not held out in that summer of 1940, all the way through to almost the end of 1941, there would have been no way for the Americans to come over and win the war. Not in Europe, anyway. It's down to a few people. 3,000 young men of our Air Fighter Command, of which there are only one left nowadays. Men of the Royal Navy, the Merchant Navy, the British Army at Dunkirk, code breakers at Bletchley Park, and 1,000 other people, I'm sure. So that's why I do my thing every day, letting people know what was happening on that respective day 80 years ago. I'll try and do a proper video for May 1944, Dunkirk, certainly in another week or so. Dunkirk, or Operation Dynamo, started around about 21st, 24th of May, and then I'll ease up on it, and then we'll start with the Battle of Britain in July.